This is Gary Borchel here from NewCreationCivilization.com. This is the first video in a new series talking about the origin and foundation of the purpose of God in the earth and its importance in the current age for God's people. In this video, we'll look at the significance of the fact there was nothing but God before the foundation of the physical creation and its beginning. Okay, let's get going on this. We're going to continue on now with our series on God's purpose in the earth, and we'll start with the beginning, of course, although God was always there before the beginning, which is actually what's more important because his purpose is called the eternal purpose. We'll get into that later in the series. But as far as creation goes, as John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, referring to Jesus. And in Genesis 1:1 it says, in the beginning God, it goes on to say, created the heavens and the earth. Now, the point of all that is the beginning God. That's what I really want to focus on here. And that is that in the beginning there was nothing but God. There was nothing outside of God. Nothing existed that wasn't God. That's extremely important to comprehend and take into account when we consider God's purpose, because everything was based upon him. Nothing existed outside of him. Not even thought existed outside of his thought. So when creation began, when God began creation, everything was formed out of who the invisible, eternal God was. So when he started creating everything, what issued forth was based upon his invisible nature and comprehensive knowledge of himself. Even though, it says the Holy Spirit searches out the deep things of God. Obviously it happened to before creation started. God knew who he was, obviously, and everything that came forth out of him came forth out of who he was and his knowledge of himself. So once creation was over, everything in the physical creation was aligned with the invisible attributes of God. That's why God declared his work at the end of each day good, and at the end of when man was created, because he was in the image of God, he was declared very good. Okay? So everything at that time was as it was meant to be. But after sin and rebellion brought in something else of God, outside of God's purpose and thought, which brought about the broken, diseased world we now live in. And in 2 Corinthians 10:5, Paul talks about this when he admonishes us to actually come back to that which was the original thought of God. And it says this, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, and bring into captivity every thought to the obedience to Christ. That's another way of saying he wants us to visibly represent him on this earth, in thought, word, and deed. That means everything that contradicts the revelation of God in the Bible is to be rejected by us. It must be cast down in the very thoughts and actions, only reflecting what it is that God thinks and who he is.